Thanks for tuning in to the World XP podcast. If you're enjoying the content, please drop us up, drop a like, and let us know your thoughts below in the comments. Also, please consider supporting our podcast via the link below. It really helps us out.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the World XP podcast. This is a new episode, obviously. It's the first time I'm going solo. We're going to try out this new thing. We'll see how it goes. I have no idea. I've not done this before. I'm a little bit excited. I asked people for suggestions, and the only one I got was to go on a Bill Burr style rant. So thank you, Jared, for that. Shout out to Jared. He's been on the podcast before. Great photographer. Love his work. But yeah, so a couple things I wanted to get out of the way first. And the first one is episode last week with Cody, who's a detective, had to get taken down due to some external things that we won't really get into. But if you are looking for more information on who he is and what he does and kind of some of his story, I still do have the footage, obviously. So if you're super interested, reach out and I can maybe share some with you guys. What else is going on? Yeah, so I want to start besides that on kind of the things that I've learned through the podcast as a whole. The first is that I've been extremely lucky and privileged to talk to so many people who've done so many cool things, right? We've got Daniel G, who worked on the Declan Rice transfer, which is nuts. Riley Welch, college basketball coach. Peter Barber, his group, the Base Gang, and kind of what he's doing. And Gannon Lang, another good one. Just so many people that I've been privileged to talk to, and I've learned so many things. I think the amount of times that I've been in a conversation and either thought to myself or said out loud, "Oh, I had somebody on the podcast and I learned blank about blank subject." That's been really cool, and also gives me an excuse to talk to people. It's kind of hard to go up to somebody and be like, "Hey, can I talk to you for an hour about your job?" It's a lot easier to say, "Hey, I've got a podcast. Do you want to come on?" And then most of the time, people, I don't know, it depends on the person, of course, but super blessed to learn so many things about a lot of things about a lot of different subjects. So that's been super cool. Um, what to do next? I was listening to this podcast called from Patrick Bet David. He was interviewing the crown prince of Iran, who's the son of the Shah before the Ayatollah took over. And that got me thinking kind of because he seems like a relatively regular guy, the crown prince, obviously as regular as you can be being a crown prince, but they're talking about some of the history of Iran and some of the different things, and that got me thinking about geopolitics and kind of what motivates different countries to do different things and different leaders to do different things. Obviously, we've seen recently some of the things going on in the Middle East with Israel and Palestine and Ukraine and Russia still going on, of course. But he said something that was quite interesting that I hadn't thought about before. He said, "How often do you see democracies going to war with each other?" And I thought about it, and I can't really think of a time that happened. And that's interesting to me because it brings me kind of around to the subject of ambition and what ambition is and what it does for people and also to people. Because we see a lot about self-help and kind of self-improvement, be the best person you can be, kind of that wave started by Jordan Peterson, and you see people talking about all these things that you can do to improve yourself, and you got the cold plunge crowd, and you've got the nutrition people and all the different supplements you can be doing and the workouts and the mental health, right? Go to therapy, fix your mental health, and all these things are kind of, there's a certain level of ambition that you need to improve yourself and who you are and what you're doing. And then left unchecked, it turns into like a Putin situation or a Kim Jong-un situation or something like that, where the ambition is like, okay, you're in charge of a whole country and you've got all this stuff at your disposal. What else do you need? And it's like, well, I need to go invade Ukraine. We can talk about why also, right? This not that decision was not made in a vacuum solely on ambition, of course, but the the reason why somebody would rise to that position, right? Somebody like Putin doesn't get there by accident. They have to get there because they're driven to get there, right? If you can imagine Russia after the collapse of the Soviet Union, there's probably a lot of people that wanted to be in that spot and wanted to take his spot. So you have to have a certain amount of ambition to stay there, obviously. But then also you look at somebody like um, a Joe Rogan. You have to be ambitious to do what he's done, to create what he's created with the podcast and kind of the comedy scene in Austin. And you ask yourself kind of, well, they're both extremely ambitious people. They've both gotten to the top of what their fields or industries are, right? Putin is at the top of the political chain in Russia and much of the world. Rogan is at the top of the comedy and podcasting space. And it's like, well, then what motivates that? And that is where I don't know the answer because they both have everything and yet they still keep pushing. Um, the human psyche is super weird. It's so weird to me, so intriguing because people are motivated by all sorts of different things. There's money or power or the ambition to improve. There's some people that I know that just want to be better versions of themselves, and that's great as well. But then it's do you extend that to wanting to help the people around you? I don't know. It's an interesting thing to think about because there's no one person has lived the same life and has been dealt the same hand of cards, the same capabilities as anyone else, circumstances, anything. There's not one person that's lived the exact same. And so when you compare people, it makes it very difficult, right? A lot of social media is comparison, and that's obviously we've talked a lot on this podcast before about comparison is the thief of joy. And then you run into, well, what mark do I use to get better? What measure do I use to improve myself or to measure myself? And you might say, well, measure yourself against yourself from yesterday. And that's a super good measure. Um, but also if you're playing sports or your sports is the easiest example that comes to mind, but like let's say you're a swimmer, you have to compare your time against the people that you're competing against. Um, and so it brings back to that thing is like everything in moderation and is good or not, maybe not as good, but too much of anything becomes negative very quickly. Um, and that's super interesting because you look at right ambition we talked about earlier, and then comparison we talked about. I think it's knowing when to apply those sorts of subjects or not subjects, those sorts of things, right? If you have zero ambition, then that's probably not good either. If you never compare yourself to anyone else, that's also probably not good. But there's a healthy level that it has to be um a healthy benchmark, whether you're comparing yourself to whether you're comparing yourself to you, which I think is more optimal probably, or somebody else, right? But given like the swimming situation we talked about, you can always say, okay, well, I want to improve my own time. It's like, well, that's true. But then there's a certain level of realism. Like if you're so far off somebody else's time, maybe do you go to a new event or you try a different stroke or like what do you do? You can only improve your own time so much. Um, and then of course if you're somebody like Michael Phelps, then the person you're competing like when he was at his absolute prime, like '08 Olympics, winning 8 gold medals or whatever the number was, the only person you can compare yourself to is yourself because that's where you are. Like, so that's been something that I've been thinking about. Another thing that I've been thinking about, I was watching these videos on YouTube produced by Drumeo. And one of the series that they have is they bring on a drummer, like so for example, Chad Smith, who's the drummer for the Red Hot Chili Peppers, or Jonathan Moffat, who's Michael Jackson's drummer, and they play him a song they've never heard before. And they're like, okay, go drum along to that song. And watching these guys like nail it first try is, or maybe one listen and then one take, um, is astounding, honestly. And the people that are the best in the world at their craft are so much better than people realize, or maybe people do realize, I don't know. But I've realized, I guess, that they're so much better at at their craft than like the average person who picks it up in their garage or in their free time, or soccer, for example, they're playing in their local Sunday league compared to like the best in the world. There was an interview with Kevin Prince Boateng, who's uh he's Ghanaian. He played for AC Milan and Barcelona and a few other clubs. He bounced around a lot, and he was saying the difference between Messi and Luis Suarez in training was huge. And Suarez at that time was regarded as like as the best striker in the world or one of them. And the difference between those people who are just the best in the world at their thing and then kind of the next rung down as it falls down the pyramid, it's amazing to just see the talent and the work and the effort that these people put into their craft and where it leads to. Um, we went through a phase on, or not a phase. We went through a time on the show where we talked a lot about greatness and somebody like Michael Jordan or LeBron and the competitive drive and nature. And that doesn't, like I think with drumming, for example, probably like Chad Smith is probably not up there being like, oh, I'm gonna make sure that I'm better than some other drummer. But there's a level of competition. Same thing that we talked about before, where it's like, so where do you draw the line for the level of competition, right? Kobe and MJ's level of competitiveness allowed the rest of us to watch Kobe and MJ in the iterations that they were. But without that, if maybe, for example, when they were young, somebody was like, oh, you're being too competitive or you're being too hard on the other kids, like, do we get to see that? Because at what point do you say that kid is in school and his classmate can't like guard him or whatever? It's like being mean. It's like, oh, I'm gonna score on you every time. Like when you're in fifth grade, it's kind of like, all right, relax, dude. But then if it's tamped down and not allowed to flourish, that competitive spirit's not allowed to flourish, do we see that level of greatness? There's a story that Dwayne Wade was telling about Kobe in the Olympics when they played, I think it was 2008 or maybe 2012, I think 2008. When they played Spain in the final, Pau Gasol was Kobe's teammate. And Kobe said the first play of the game, I'm running him over on the screen. And even guys like Wade and LeBron and we're like, no, you're not. That's your teammate on the Lakers. Like, why would you do that? And sure enough, you can go Google go YouTube the clip. It runs right through it. Runs him right over. Set the tone for the game. But that level of competitiveness is bonkers and a little bit nuts, to be honest. But how do you channel it? How does Kobe channel it? How does MJ channel it? I think by all accounts that we figured out during the Last Dance documentary that MJ was not the greatest teammate in the world. I think he punched Steve Kerr a couple of times. Who's the coach of the Warriors now. Um, it's like how do you channel that level of whether it's competitiveness or ambition or anything? How do you channel it? Because it can be channeled for the right things, given the right circumstances. And it's like what makes that person who they are? What level of circumstance makes them them? Never really know. You never really know. You look back at how many decisions have you made where you look back and you're like, oh, I shouldn't have made that decision, or why did I make that decision? And you don't even know why you made the decision that you made 4 days ago. But all of those decisions pile up into the person that you are. So then do you have a framework for making those decisions? Like how do you go about making decisions in your life? What framework do you have that you put in the circumstances? You say, okay, these are the circumstances I'm in, these are my options, and based on this moral framework, this is the decision that I'm going to make based on these circumstances and these outcomes and these potential secondary and tertiary effects. It's interesting. And I think a lot of these things come back to who that person is as an individual, but then you can have the discussion on is it nature or nurture that really creates a person? Like, are they just who they are, plopped into that environment, or does the environment shape that person? And just like all the other things we said, my opinion is somewhere in the middle, which is kind of fence sitting, but that's okay. Um, because I don't think anyone really knows the answer. I mean, psychology people, or like early development psychology people, if you are listening and you've made it this far through the rambling, put it in the comments. Maybe I don't know. Um, I hope it's not all nurture, or I mean, I hope it's not all nature, right? Like if somebody's just stuck how they are, doesn't the nurturing doesn't matter at all. I feel like it can't be that. But I also don't think that humans are a blank slate either. We talked earlier about no human will ever live the same life as another. This won't the circumstances and the personality of the individual. So it's got to be some nature, but it also has to be some nurture. Um, because and the reason that it's different is you have two totally different people and react to the same environment in two totally different ways. Um, but you also can then make the decision. If we operate off the assumption that free will exists for the most part, there's things like addiction and other things that make it hard to make certain decisions. But if we operate off the assumption that free will exists, then you could have two totally different personalities of people put into the exact same environment and then end up making the same decision based on different thought processes or different they draw the same conclusion from a different way. And that's something that's interesting because if you make a lot of those decisions, right, as the decisions pile up from a human, what is the goes back to what's the framework that they are using. And so then you can I don't know. It's just it's fascinating. I don't really know where I'm going with that, but it's fascinating, I guess, that you can have somebody channel some level of I hear about Tom Brady saying that he would try and make himself angry before he played. And most people associate anger. You're like, oh, I want to hit the other guy hard, or I want to do this or that. But Tom Brady wasn't an athlete. He was like a cerebral type player, right? Think I think probably push a chair down the driveway is faster than Tom Brady. I don't really know where I was going with that. Point is, he's slow, right? And most people, when they associate anger, you're like, oh, I'm gonna in soccer, I'm gonna slide tackle this guy really hard, or I'm gonna in football, I'm gonna tackle this guy really hard, or in basketball, I'm gonna dunk on this guy, or I'm gonna block him, or any of these things. But Tom Brady is like, no, I'm gonna like be very angry at you, and then I'm gonna be very calculated. I'm gonna pick your defense apart, and that's kind of like if that level of anger plus competitiveness plus calculation was put into, I don't know, anger at society or something, right? And you have a guy with that capability, so all of a sudden doing horrible things to society, where it's like, I don't know, like robbing banks. Don't rob banks. But then we're looking at a totally different. It's so much different, obviously. Where he's channeling, he channeled it into football. So, and you never really know. Like, I don't think anyone knows the answers to a lot of these questions. If they did, I think they'd probably be billionaires. Maybe, I don't know. It's interesting to think about. Is you watch people go through life. You watch yourself go through life. How do you interact with the world? How do I interact with the people around me and the things around me and the decisions that I make? When is it okay to be selfish? Is there a difference between selfish and self-preserving? When you put the team or the tribe or the group first, where do you draw the line? It's up to you. It's up to me to draw my own line, my own boundaries, and how to set those boundaries. Hmm. Very, very interesting topic for sure. Topic of boundaries. I think boundary setting is super important, especially for people of my generation, parents that are feel certain ways about certain things, or as we grow into kind of our adult lives and the relationship with our parents gets different, and maybe you have to learn where your boundaries are and where to set them, and kind of if somebody crosses them, then you have to know what you're going to do about it. And that can be tough because it kind of is like you hope that you don't have to be mad at somebody or something. Like you really don't like that's not a good well, maybe unless you're Tom Brady, then you hope everybody crosses your boundary so you can go win 7 Super Bowls. But you hope that doesn't have to happen, but sometimes it does. And then you've got to sort out how you're going to deal with it. And that's very interesting too, because not every situation calls for the same level of anger. Because you have to look at, okay, what was the boundary crossed? Why was the boundary crossed? Did that person know it was a boundary? Was it purposeful? Was it an accident? Can you forgive and forget? Or was it so far past the boundary that there's no forget like because then there's the boundary that's crossed, and then there's the second boundary of like, okay, they crossed my boundary, but I can forgive them, or they did something so egregious that I can't forgive them anymore. So that's two boundaries within one. It's like they crossed the boundary. How far did they cross the boundary? Did they cross it to the other boundary? And then you have to set that too. And then you have to decide what you're gonna do in all of the situations. Like what level of what action is going to warrant this level of response. You have to kind of sort that out for yourself. I struggle with that a bit sometimes. I'm working on it though for sure. It's tough. It's tough. Hmm. Let's see what else. Oh yeah, communication. So when you communicate, you set the boundaries, but I think clear and concise communication, right? If I wonder how many times that there's been fights because of misunderstandings, and that makes me kind of unhappy, right? It's like that wasn't actually what was meant to be said, or that wasn't meant what was meant to be felt or conveyed, or um and whoever was receiving the message didn't receive it in the way that it was intended to be received. Whose fault were you not clear in your communication? Was I not clear in my communication, or did I not listen to what was trying to be communicated? Or did I make an attempt to listen? Did I ask a clarifying question? What happened to lead to that misunderstanding? How many chances did we have to to sort through that misunderstanding? Have relationships, work, everything. Learning to communicate is I wish I had learned that like super young, especially when like in school when you write essays, nobody tells you why you're writing an essay. It's like why do you write an essay when you're in fifth grade or eighth grade or whatever? Well, because the teacher said I had to, and I don't want to fail the class or want to get an A in the class or whatever it is. It's like, well, what you're actually doing is you're learning how to think of the answer to a question and then communicate that in a written way. And I didn't realize that until after I graduated college, and that kind of sucked. I was a bit annoyed when I realized that. I was like, if I had realized that, I would have picked much more interesting topics or figured out what I wanted to write about in a way that I wasn't waiting till the last minute because I'd rather be doing gazillion other things. Although to be fair, I probably still would have rather done a gazillion things anyways. But I don't know. Also, the amount of times I said I don't know so far has been. This is not a musing and finding solutions episode. This is a there are no solutions study of these study of these things episode. Um, yeah, communication, crazy. Learning how to figure out what somebody really said or meant when they sent you an email or whatever, or a text, or learning to figure out what they really meant or were getting at before you decide kind of what your reaction is going to be. Also super important. Help avoid a lot of misunderstandings. Misunderstandings, I think, are horrendous. It's so bad. It's like I don't know. In a perfect world, obviously there'd be no misunderstandings, and I wonder how many wars would have not occurred because of if there were no misunderstandings. Then you also have purposeful misunderstandings. You look at people that are, and this kind of goes into the nature of humans, and I feel like there's always going to be bad actors, and so it's hard to the phrase "in a perfect world." Ooh, voice crack. Episode 100, Jennifer Glatzofer told us why voice cracks happen. I don't remember what it was, but you guys should go listen. The phrase "in a perfect world" exists because the world isn't perfect, and there's people, and nobody's perfect, and you have to hope that everyone has good intentions. You don't have to hope. You can feel about people however people want to feel about them, but I would like to hope that most people have good intentions. But then it's discerning when people do not have good intentions is a skill that um super important. When does somebody not have a good intention? When do you no longer take something at face value? Don't know that either. Depends on your gut feeling or your boundaries, like we talked about earlier. I think all these things are. This is kind of a compilation of things that I've heard from friends over the years about. It's like, oh, I wish I should have worded this differently because this friend misunderstood it and now they're mad at me. Or my mom's doing this and I don't know how to tell her I don't want to go to this gathering. I don't know. Those are not specific examples, just kind of made up ones. But yeah, it's just these thoughts are kind of just compilation of things I've heard from people my age, friends over the years. Hmm. This is not that easy to just talk at a screen for however long it's been so far. It's kind of crazy that Tim Dillon, if you guys don't know who Tim Dillon is, you should go watch the show. He's a comedian. He just rants at the computer for an hour or at the camera for an hour, and it's hilarious. I mean, he's got producers and other people that kind of laugh when he goes through things, and he's got things that he wants to talk about. Um, yeah, crazy. I don't know how he does it. And then even with Rogan, when he's got guests and he goes for 3 hours, like when I have guests, I go for an hour, maybe 3 hours is nuts. All right, let's look up. Let's see if I can go to Apple News and see what's going on, and maybe I can. In the meantime, we can talk about my favorite team, Dortmund, who's playing like buns at the moment. It's like lose to Bayern 4-0, lose to Stuttgart. We're we've lost 3 games and 3 league games in all of this calendar year, and we still didn't win the Bundesliga last season. And right now we are sitting in fifth, I think. Fifth. Yeah, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. That's what happens when you tie teams that are in 13th and 14th. If we had won those 2 games, let's see, we'll add another. We'd be in third, but still, it doesn't look like we don't look like every time we play. I'm like, oh, guys, string some passes together, please. We're not winning. We're not winning our tackles. We're not making silly mistakes in the back. The Bundesliga in Germany, I think, as a whole, like Germany lost to Turkey 3-2 today, which I think is interesting. Then France won 14-0 against Gibraltar, which I mean Gibraltar got a red card in the 18th minute and then no hat tricks. One hat trick, Mbappe, of course. And then only Coman and Giroud scoring more than one. A lot of goals, that's for sure. Oh, that must have been a miserable game to play against for Gibraltar. I can't even imagine. Oh no. Is that the same guy? The guy that the guy that got the red card scored an own goal. So he scored an own goal in the 3rd minute and got sent off in the 18th minute. That is a game that he will want to forget for sure. Oh no. That's horrendous. All right, let me go. What was I doing? Oh yes, Apple News. Okay, let's see. Yeah, this is when you know it's bad. I don't even know where my news tab is. Um, Maybe we'll search for it. News. All right, so we got Israel, Palestine, of course. I'm not going to avoid it, but I don't know a lot about the topic, so this is what I'll say. In 1947 or 1948, whenever the state of Israel was founded, I understand why that it was founded where it was. Like, let's not. I get it, right? There's religious history and the Jewish people say that kind of that's their ancestral home, and I get it, right? But it feels like it feels like it's like okay, so the UN is like, okay, you guys go here, and then it's like, what do the people that are living there do? It's like, hey guys, we're living here. You can't just make us leave. So then they try and fight back, and then the Jewish people who are put there are like, why are you attacking us? So then it just starts and it goes from there. So I don't know. I feel like Israel could have just been in like Montana or something. This could be totally wrong, by the way, right? I have very limited understanding. And that's all I'm gonna say about it. I don't really know a lot about it. I don't know a lot about the region. I had who did we have on the show? What was his Dr. Ranjit Singh. He was on the show, expert in kind of Middle Eastern politics. I hope to have him back on kind of during the winter break after the semester's over at Mary Washington where he teaches, and I'm sure we'll get his perspective on it there. But yeah, I don't know a lot of. It seems so complicated. It's hard to kind of sort out what hard to sort out like really what's going on over there. It's I don't know. Like I think what Hamas did is horrendous. What Israel's doing is also horrendous. I don't know. Kind of I'm in the like I just want people to stop dying. I feel like I don't know. I feel like that's not that controversial, but all right, let's see. Apple News. You need to pay for Apple News. Why? Why do I need to pay for Apple News? Let's see. We can talk about maybe the 2024 elections and stuff. I think that'll be interesting. The Republican primary debate was a week or two ago, the third one, and that one went interesting to say the least. I think Vivek was probably the big winner. He seemed to separate himself a little bit. He called out Kristen Walker or whatever her name is for the Russia Gate or whatever you want to call it. That was proven to be not real, but was talked about for 3 years of Trump's term, which was kind of obviously not good. Um, and she had nothing to say about it. Obviously, I think he knew that she wouldn't say anything, but kind of that seemed like a way to separate himself from the other ones. Because I think, at least from what I understand, is that Trump is pretty far ahead in the polls, and I don't really know if we got a Trump Biden rematch. I don't really know how that's going to go. Um, I don't know. I don't know. Vivek has also said, I believe, that he doesn't really want to be a VP. Um, but kind of where his policy stance lies that I find interesting is he's just differentiating himself from the other ones. Kind of you hear the from Tim Scott and Nikki Haley and DeSantis, you kind of hear similar things. Um, and Vivek, you hear a little bit different. And I don't think there's been somebody like him running maybe recently. I guess I mean maybe Trump. I don't know if you want to say that. I just the whole thing is just extraordinarily interesting. I kind of the state of who we're voting for, right? Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, obviously was on Rogan's podcast, and that like he's being, I guess, mentioned as somebody that might run. It's kind of like where is the state of the country? Just seems like it's in a very weird or strange spot that we've got a guy that was running the Celebrity Apprentice and a guy that was a WWE star, kind of like names that are being thrown around there for president. Like strange. It kind of goes back to the whole ambition thing that we were talking about before because we're sitting there and we're saying like something like most of the time I think this saying is fairly common too. A lot of the time the person that you want to be the leader is somebody that doesn't actually want to be the leader. And so that's kind of like it's somebody that's let's say maybe called to duty and or called to serve. Like that's a different thing than the ambition thing. Um, and then you run into the dichotomy of somebody that's called to serve, and then you've got people who are ambitious that want that spot, that want that whether it's a president spot or a CEO or whatever the case may be is it's like how do you deal with that? How do you as like you don't want to make somebody do something that they don't want to do, but you also don't want to just I don't know. It's so weird. So weird. Humans are so weird. Um, let's see other things to talk about. I don't know. I think I want to feel cautiously optimistic about the US as a whole. Um, there's definitely things that could be better, obviously. I think we all know that. But it's got to start somewhere, and I think that with the advent of people call it like new media or whatever, podcasts and other kind of news organizations that aren't the legacy ones, being able to bring information to the table. It's making it a more complex, but making it a more complex world, but also shedding light on a lot of things that I think need to have light shed on them. The reason why it's more complex is because now anyone can just do what I'm doing. Like nobody should listen to me, really, but anyone can do this. Um, and so it's hard to sort out where you're getting your information from. Is it valid? Is it from a reliable source? Or what are the biases within that individual who's saying certain things? Um, it used to be, oh, they're on the TV, they know what they're talking about. Now it's not that, but so it's become much more confusing because somebody can build an audience and a platform. They go viral on TikTok once, and all of a sudden they built a platform, and you're like, who is this guy or who is this girl? Like, where did they come from? What do they know? What do you mean they're an expert in whatever? And that's becoming a thing, right? People feel like they have to have an opinion on everything. I've been up here just asking questions. I don't know anything. Saying like with Israel and Palestine, it's like I don't know anything about it. I want to know more. People, please correct me in the comments. Like I want to understand what's going on. Um, but I have no clue. I don't know. Also, with the new media stuff, like people don't have time to go do research and check 4 or 5 sources to see kind of what's really going on. And it's hard. It's hard. You have to have like a balanced diet of different biases and different perspectives, and then kind of understand that like being able to differentiate a fact from an opinion now more than ever, I think is important. Or because some you might get a statement where it's mostly fact, but there's an embellishment or there's an omission. Um, and being able to sort out for yourself, like where's the embellishment, where's the omission, where's the fact, where's the opinion, where's the like is so important, and it's so hard. It's so hard to do that. Hmm. Let's see. What else is a thing I want to talk about? Youth sports. I think we'll talk about this for a bit and then we'll end on it and we'll kind of see what feedback comes in. If you're still watching, comment solo in the comments. Youth sports. I think kids should be playing as many sports as they can. I think the specialization is happening too early. It's leading to injuries. We see this in some of the kids that I train. Um, you really, the reason for it is you use different muscle groups for different sports. Whether maybe you're a basketball player and you also play lacrosse. I don't know. Or you're a soccer player and you're a swimmer. You use different muscles, you develop different muscles that you need, and then you also, in the other season, you give the ones that you've been using a rest. Let's say you're a soccer player in the fall and spring, but in the winter you swim. In the winter, you're staying in shape, but you're giving all the muscles that are predominantly used for soccer, you're giving them a rest because you're using different muscle groups and different joints and ligaments and tendons. And it allows them to heal while maintaining fitness and building strength in other areas. So when you go back in the spring, you've built more core strength in swimming, for instance, and that helps for everything. But you've been strengthening it in a different way from soccer. I think that's super important. Also, turf sucks. Bad grass sucks too, but we see this with kind of the World Cup coming in 2026 to the U.S. and the Aaron Rodgers Achilles injury that he suffered the week 1 of the NFL season this year, and he tore his Achilles because the cleat got caught in the turf. And then FIFA came out and said that all of the stadiums in the U.S. that are hosting World Cup game, there'll be grass. And the NFL was the players you didn't over the NFL was kind of like, hey, what the hell, man? Like we've been asking for grass for forever. It's not as cut and dry as that, right? You got like I know Green Bay is grass, but is it bad grass? What kind of grass is it, right? Like if you by the same token, if you're on turf and you plant and you just move as you normally would. But if you're grass and your foot slips out from under you and somebody falls on your leg, right, then you tear something else. So there's both things. I think definitely grass is better for injuries than turf, but I believe it's 15 and 15. 15 stadiums have grass, 15 have turf in the NFL. I don't know what I'm 99% sure that's what it is. Um, some climates, it's hard to have grass. Um, New England, it's kind of tough to have good grass there. This is cold. With that said, though, Pittsburgh has grass, but it's always like muddy and kind of torn up. It's not the same grass as you would get at like a Raymond James Stadium in Tampa, something like that. So I don't know. I don't know. I hope they sort it out, and I hope that like we talked about earlier, I hope there's not a bunch of misunderstandings and everybody can get on the same page. Obviously, there's a lot of financial implications for a variety of these things, but I think at the end of the day, if everybody wanted everybody else to do well, I think the world would be a better place. And that's kind of where the ambition thing and all these things, it's like I want you to do well. Like somebody might say this. I want you to do well, and then they think up until you are impeding my own ascendancy or whatever. And then it causes problems. Then you run into conflicts. It's the same with countries. It's like, well, we're all going great until you're taking part of my oil or whatever the resource is, right? So that's where the communication comes. It's their compromise, right? People say a good compromise leaves nobody happy. I don't know. Probably true. It's probably true. All right, guys, we'll wrap it up there. This was fun, a little bit nerve-wracking. Hoping for feedback in the comments. Um, and yeah, we'll see you guys next time. Obviously, we got a question from Cody, whose episode was taken down, but that'll be for the next guest. And I think we'll go from there. We'll try and keep on regularly scheduled programming, but I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. Please, feedback is very welcome. I'm kind of running into a little bit of a wall with the podcast in terms of what to do with it. So if you guys like the solo episode, please let me know. If you guys want to maybe a shorter episode or whatever the case may be, is all those things, leave them in the comments. Feedback is open, or feedback is welcome. And yeah, I will see you guys next time. Peace.